It doesn't have a Thunderbolt 2, VGA, or traditional USB. They removed MagSafe. They removed the SD card reader. Max RAM of 16 gigs is too low. If you like it, you're a sheeple. The keyboard types too loudly, and that bothers me for some reason. There, now that I've said all the typical complaints about this laptop, I've saved you the effort of constantly reminding me about them in the comments. So let's actually talk about this consumer product in an unbiased, understanding manner. I think the first thing that has to be discussed when talking about any Apple product is the customer experience. How do I feel when I use the product? For years, and I still maintain that this is the case to this day, Apple fans believed using an Apple computer simply felt better than using a PC. Now, many PC and Microsoft fans are going to tune out simply because I brought up operating systems, but in order for us to all get along, we need to seed certain facts about each other. Apple developed a very solid, very easy-to-use ecosystem that catered to designers and artists. Navigating anything on a Mac felt, and still feels, good. I still maintain that quick preview on files simply by hitting spacebar is one of the most ingenious additions to any operating system ever. So when an Apple person continues to buy Apple, it's not because they just want to buy something that Apple makes mindlessly. It's more like chasing that heroin high. They just want it to be as good as the first time. They just want to continue on with the same user experience that they have come to know, and they'll spend an absurd amount of money to get it, even at the cost of other features. It's no secret that Microsoft has been dramatically improving over the years, and that the diversity of options in that side of the market has led to a more affordable price point for the same things or better than you find in a comparable Apple product. But to an Apple user, that doesn't really matter. They're chasing the OS. So with that said, PC users have to understand where Apple users are coming from. That they're not just mindless drones buying anything that Apple sells. There is a method to the madness. And it may, at times, be totally mad. Let's look specifically at the MacBook Pro, because the 2016 release of the much-anticipated professional mobile computing machine was hit hard immediately by a giant hellstorm of bad press. It didn't necessarily help that Apple's keynote on the iPhone 7 and their whole Brave thing was still ringing in people's heads at this point, and the pitchforks and torches were lit well before there was any actual announcement. The MacBook Pro made many of the same mistakes that I highlighted in the Canon 5D Mark IV release. There was too much buildup, too much time to sit and create expectations for the MacBook Pro to ever meet them with any sense of satisfaction. That, combined with any idea that the computer was less than its predecessors, and you have the perfect storm of angry and dissatisfied. If you look anywhere online, it's actually pretty hard to find a review that's mostly positive on the computer. That's a real shame, because through its faults, there's a lot to like about the MacBook Pro. But the reason that so vastly differing groups across the internet all kind of agree on the same things regarding the MacBook Pro is something pivotally important that I'll touch on at the end. But the purveying argument that the Pro isn't really Pro is not totally inaccurate. But it's not totally accurate either. Bear with me. Looking beyond the lack of ports and the weirdly low battery life compared to what is expected and advertised, the MacBook Pro feels good to use. That is one thing that Apple developers absolutely nailed and continue to nail with most of their products. It just feels pleasant. The keys, the touchpad, the smoothness of the operation are all incredibly pleasant. Even avid PC users have to admit at least that point. Despite other shortcomings, Apple clearly wanted users to feel a certain way and have a certain experience when using the MacBook Pro, and I think they succeeded here. One place I do want to stop and mention momentarily is that giant touchpad. I mean, it's giant, huge even. That's nice in that it's easy to get to no matter how big or small your hand, but annoying because it is very easy to accidentally touch it with the side of your hand while typing. I had to completely change how I positioned my wrist on my right hand because I couldn't get right click to work if another part of my hand was touching the pad. Something that happened very frequently because the sheer size of the pad takes up where I used to rest my hand when typing. It was a nice idea, but in practice, the huge size is just awkward. Online pundits and YouTubers, bloggers and editors, they will all find a way to say that the lack of ports means that a product can't be made for professionals. It's actually the biggest finger as to why the MacBook Pro isn't pro, in quotes, at all. As a pro myself, I don't think that's fair. Sure, it's a big part in the picture, but as a pro, I have used the MacBook Pro for professional things. I've edited articles, videos, and spreadsheets on the MacBook Pro, and everything feels great and works fantastically. Is that not something professionals do? Did it not work? That said, while on location in Georgia late in December of 2016, my assistant tried to give me one of his memory cards to dump, and I was unable to do so because of the lack of an SD card port. I actually had to bring the card home, dump the data on my main desktop machine, put the SD card in a box, and FedEx it back to him. That is a set of circumstances that actually happened, and it was kind of a pain in the ass. USB-C has its advantages in that it can be many, many things. However, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Apple opted to ditch MagSafe on the MacBook Pro because the USB-C connection can instead power the machine. They were able to ditch a port of sorts and consolidate, except that, save for one real-world reason, I disagree with the choice. Thanks to USB-C, you can now charge your computer on either side of the device, which is kind of nice. Sometimes the plug isn't on your right and sometimes it isn't on your left. The MacBook Pro can use either side. Except the one thing we had to give up for this minor convenience was the knowledge that our computer couldn't be torn off our desks by a rogue foot. My own rogue foot. I've totally done that before, and thanked the computer gods that my computer wasn't flung across the room with the rocket speed of a bro who hears the words strippers and Slim Jims uttered together. Also weirdly, the brick for charging the MacBook is a lot heavier than it used to be. At least double. I mean, at least it feels like at least double. So even though the computer got lighter, the extra weight just moved into the charging apparatus, which I have to take with me anyway. And you know what else? I missed the fact that the Apple doesn't glow. It's the little things, but it was a little thing that I liked. After the whole port issue, it's the RAM Max that has people most upset. Here, I actually kind of have to agree. One of the first things I do with a new iMac is upgrade the memory to maximum capacity. I do notice a difference in performance when I do this. I think the mentality of Apple, as flawed as it might be, was that the MacBook Pro doesn't need the memory if you're using Apple products on the MacBook Pro. Apple software is extremely good at efficiency on its own devices. Final Cut, Pages, Safari, etc. They all run smoothly and with little drag on memory and GPU. But building a machine with a 16GB cap on it, for this reason, is assuming your users will all be using Mac products, which we don't. Photographers specifically will at least need Photoshop and Lightroom, because Apple even has to admit they don't have a solution in-house for this anymore. And files can get pretty meaty on the former, Photoshop, and the latter, Lightroom, already runs sluggishly on the best of computers. I can't really keep going without addressing the two biggest additions to the MacBook Pro, the much maligned Touch Bar and the new fingerprint scanner. What's funny about the latter is that fingerprint scanners on laptops are totally not new. They've been on the lower right-hand corner of IBM Lenovo business machines for like 10 years. What makes the scanner on the MacBook more useful is that it links to your Apple Pay account, as well as can be used for logins much like you find on your iPhone. Actually, exactly like you find on your iPhone. These feature adds I like. This is the kind of thing I like. They make paying for things faster and accessing my computer easier. It's a smart addition. In contrast, the Touch Bar as a whole sort of does the complete opposite. Though I do think there are places that the Touch Bar does well, such as scrubbing through footage and video editing, in general it's kind of a massive distraction. Here's my perspective, and it's a perspective you may or may not share, but I feel like I need to explain. When I grew up, part of elementary school was learning how to type. They put an extreme emphasis on it. The teacher would put these little keyboard-shaped orange silicone covers on the keyboards so we could still use the keyboard but we couldn't see the keys, and then we had to type what we saw on the screen. When we got something wrong, the computer made a noise and it showed what we did wrong in red. All the while the teacher, who in my case was also a nun, hovered menacingly behind me. That, right there, trained me good and quick to not look down at my hands when I was typing. And that's reason number one, and really the only reason I need to state, why the Touch Bar doesn't really help me. It goes against deeply ingrained training not to look down at my hands, and requires me to stop and look to make sure I'm doing something right. In essence, it actually slows me down dramatically from a process that I spent over 20 years practicing. It is really cool how the touch bar essentially makes the keyboard adapt to whatever program you're currently in. At least, that's the eventual goal, since really only a few apps take full advantage of the bar at this point. I like the idea of my computer morphing to fit present needs. In the end, the touch bar is, as many have said before, a solution looking for a problem. It's this weird in-between zone of having a touch interface and not. It's as if Apple kind of wanted to do the Surface thing, but chickened out halfway through. It's neat, but not particularly helpful. And that sucks. I really wanted it to be helpful. But all the things I just highlighted aren't really my sticking points. None of them bother me to a degree that would shy me away from the computer. No, what gets me is a philosophy. It's a philosophy in motion that I can't ignore. So what is it? Apple has a very odd inconsistency with their recent product releases that really bothers me. Even though I like the way the computer handles, don't have a particular issue with the hardware specs or even the price, as high as it is, I can't ignore this one huge glaring inconsistency with the product development that takes a giant dump on those feelings. Connectivity. Apple seems intent on getting rid of ports and unifying the systems and moving themselves into a future that maybe we aren't ready for. They have a history of forcing change before anyone else, and we end up looking back at the decision and applauding it because we can admit that it was right. Hell, remember those colorful iMacs that were so popular? They didn't have a CD burner. Remember Toaster? I remember Toaster. Anyway, that goal in itself is admirable. Hell, maybe it's even brave. But when you can't be consistent among your top 2 product lines currently available, it makes even Apple fans scratch their heads. Removing the headphone jack from the iPhone didn't bother me much at all, but not including a way to directly connect that device with the MacBook Pro? Moving to USB-C on the laptop, but sticking with Lightning on the phone with no direct Lightning connection to the laptop? How do I ask, does that make sense? Competitor products from Motorola, Samsung, and LG are moving to USB-C for their phones, which can connect directly to a MacBook Pro with one simple unified cable. That can also be used to connect to a host of other peripherals, but not the iPhone. That right there is a huge head scratcher. Why would you purposely divide your top 2 selling products? Was adding a Lightning connection on the side of a MacBook Pro too hard? Too obvious? Not obvious enough? I was totally willing to forgive every other complaint made against the MacBook Pro up until that point. It feels like Apple's departments don't communicate at all through the year or longer development cycle of some of their products. It baffles me that at no point in the design process for either product did someone not stand up during a, stand up and say, wait, we don't want our products to easily connect to one another? And boy, if someone did and no one listened, perhaps that's even worse than the situation of simply oversight. I can't help but think it was rather impossible for it to have been only oversight. And that troubles me. The more I think about it, the more I realize that it was likely impossible for the oversight situation I just proposed to have happened given the number of people that work at Apple and the incredible talent they hire there. That means someone did say something, that person was ignored, and they willingly chose to release 2 major products that have no direct way to connect to one another. That really troubles me. For a company that has worked so tirelessly for years to give us new ways to connect devices and experiences, to knowingly discard something so vital is a very bright red flag. But then we go back to the heroin high. Is this enough to dump the user experience of an Apple? I mean, for some it already has. I'm sure you've heard of someone who's claimed to drop Apple for PC lately, or who actually has. But for others who are deeply, deeply connected to the workflows designed around an Apple, the answer is much muddier. So where does that leave us here with this review? It's a weird feeling looking at all these words, typing them on a MacBook Pro. It's a gorgeous, beautiful, light, wondrous product that is so tragically flawed in several unique and fascinating ways. To make something wonderful is to understand its end usage, and that's where I think Apple's having trouble these days. Who would like the MacBook Pro? Now, this is the part I mentioned in the beginning about a vast array of reviewers from different disciplines all coming to the same conclusion. There are elements of the product that appeal to different groups. The insistence on being light and portable is good, but not important to everyone. Hell, Razer just released a product that has 3 screens but weighs 12 pounds. 12 pounds! A laptop! And you know what? They're going to sell a ton of them to high-end gamers. The same people who like the lightweight probably don't care about the lack of ports because they're just going to use it to browse the internet, use email, and type term papers. Except those people can't justify the high price point. Those who don't care about price point are the same people who want ports, but they care less about weight and want high performance. So in looking at the MacBook Pro, it feels like a giant compromise, which at its core is the reason its flaws are so tragic. It's the device that tried to be too many things to too many people, and in the end ended up pleasing none of them. It's a wonderful, beautiful product that is in constant disagreement with itself. I wanted to love it, but first it has to love itself. Hey guys, thanks for watching. That was a very complicated process for me to get down because I've been an Apple user since the 90s. I want it to be clear that I still like the laptop. I mean, I think it's awesome to use. It just has so many weird disagreements with itself that it makes it challenging to really give it a glowing seal of approval. At any rate, the next episode will be focused either on the Surface Studio, which has been garnering a ton of attention because it was announced just before the MacBook Pro. I'm also going to take a look at that Nikon key mission that's coming up. And I have a couple other products in the pipeline, so we're going to keep making these, and hopefully everybody will continue to watch them. Please subscribe. It really helps to have subscriptions. I really appreciate that. And that's it. Have a good one, guys.